In Australia, we have a variety of environments in which we run cattle, and we have a large number of breeds that are used for beef production. In this section, the role of different breeds in varying environments is discussed. A properly designed crossbreeding system has to start with deciding what are the breeds that will do well in that particular environment. And in Australia, in many cases, in harsher and tropical environments, we see that people combine the Bos Indicus or the Brahman type breeds compared with the Bos Taurus, crossed with the Bos Taurus or the British breeds. And this gives you the ability to create a mix of adaptation genetics to deal with the environment. In this DVD, you'll see examples, especially in the northern rivers of New South Wales, where people have used Bos Indicus and Bos Indicus derived breeds to create a crossbreeding system that takes into consideration the unique environment of that region. So before you start a crossbreeding program, you have to take into consideration what are the climatic extremes, what type of pasture in terms of pasture quality, in terms of pasture quantity. Then there are the issues of parasites, internal and external parasites that may need to be taken into consideration. So it's quite clear that you have to do that because breeds can perform differently in different environments, and you have to take that into consideration. The first slide here that I draw your attention to is one which shows the classic comparison of a tropical versus a temperate breed when run in both a tropical and a temperate environment. You can see from this chart that down the vertical axis on the left we can see three production levels: high production, medium and low. And then we can look at two environments across the horizontal axis. That's the temperate and the tropical. And if we look at the productivity of breeds taken and run in both of those environments, we can see that they perform differently. In this case, in the first case, we see that the temperate breed, in this case, let's say Hereford, performed really well under a high production level. Good nutrition, high production potential all year round. Whereas the Hereford breed in a tropical environment, in that case, performs lowly because it has extremes of climate, internal parasites, which restrict its ability to express its genetic potential. So that's a clear example of what happens with one breed. And the opposite is true when we now turn to the tropical breed. If we look at the tropical breed working under a system or a production system or in an environment of high quality feed, we can see that the Brahman or the tropical breed might underperform the British breed under that environment. But then when we shift to the tropical environment, we can see that the Bos Indicus or Brahman breed outperforms the British breed in that situation. So we've got to take that into consideration when we're choosing the breeds that we might use in our environment. Having considered the environment, in designing a crossbreeding program, we then need to focus on specific traits within the breeds that we might look at in terms of that crossbreeding program. When we look at breeds, again, we might go back to the production environment. For instance, if we're producing Velas in an environment with high quality feed, high predictability of feed, and we're turning those Velas off at weaning into the marketplace, then clearly milk is going to be a high priority trait for someone looking at that crossbreeding system. However, if the person doesn't sell off the cattle at weaning, but grows them on to yearling or takes them right through to slaughter on the property and can get or can allow for compensatory growth post-weaning, then that producer in that environment with that production system will probably put less attention or less priority on milk. So that's another case looking before at the environmental adaptation, but in terms of traits, looking at the traits that might fit that particular production system well. And looking at the markets in combination with the production system, again we might start to look at some other traits. In this case, might be carcass traits. And when we look at carcass traits in the breed, let's look at marbling. If the final market that these cattle might be sold into, if there's a premium for marbling, then obviously marbling would be a trait you'd put into high priority in selecting the breeds for that production system. So I think it's a stepwise approach when you look at crossbreeding and fine-tuning the crossbreeding program with the production system, but it's clear that that kind of research and thinking before you start is very important. As I said before, different crossbreeds are going to perform differently in different environments under different nutrition levels. And I'd like to point you now to the second slide in this presentation, which talks about the famous Grafton crossbreeding trial. This was conducted by the New South Wales DPI in the late 1970s and 80s, but this trial still stands the test of time as a clear example how breed differences are important in crossbreeding and how different breed combinations interact with the environment in which their progeny are raised. Looking at the slide, you will see that the different breeds outlined in the slide under the three different levels of nutrition, high, medium and low, there are clear differences. And it's important to note how there is a re-ranking of the different breed combinations under the different nutritional levels. Notably, the Brahman-Hereford cross, that's the BH, they underperform relative to the purebreds and other crossbreeds under the high nutrition, but under the low nutrition, the Brahman-Hereford cross clearly outstrips the other breed types. So I'd ask you to carefully look through that slide at your leisure and just note those differences, because those interactions between the breed combinations and the different levels or the different standards of nutrition is very important. In designing a crossbreeding program, there's another important factor you need to keep in mind, is that crossbred cattle, all the benefits don't come free. Crossbred cattle do have higher feed requirements because of the higher productivity, and that needs to be discounted in your analysis. An analysis of a crossbreeding system should not only look at the outputs but also the inputs, and that's where the feed requirements are important. It basically means that in many cases with crossbred cows you're going to run less cows per unit area compared to straightbreds. And this is clearly shown in the slide that's in front of you now, where you can see the calculations and the results from Grafton, where they looked at comparing the animals for a gross margin, their profitability, after adjustment for the increased feed requirements for the crossbred cows. And you can see that in this slide. Down the vertical axis on the left, you can see the number of cows that are run. In this case, looking at the maroon bar, which is the purebred Herefords, 100 Hereford cows are run. And It's the same for each of the three pasture quality, or the high, the medium and low levels. And then the researchers have made adjustment for the crossbred cows. And you can see those adjustments there, and it certainly means that the number of cows that you run per area is reduced. However, the important thing about looking at this slide is that even after adjusting the stocking rate downwards for increased feed intake of crossbred cows compared to the 100 Hereford cows, the gross margin analysis still yielded higher profit for the crossbred cows at every level of nutrition. So it's an important factor to keep in mind as you think about the breeds, as you think about the production system for your country, and that increased food requirement must be taken into consideration. Another final factor is that when you are buying purebred bulls for your crossbreed system, you should be looking at the EBVs with your production system in mind, because it's not a widely known fact, but when you're looking at the hybrid vigor and you're looking at buying purebred bulls, the EBV effect of the purebred bulls that you buy is a bonus, cream on the top, if you like, on top of your hybrid vigors. So hybrid vigor plus superior EBVs means increased profitability. So to summarize, crossbreeding, focusing on your production system and your environment, it's important to consider all the inputs and all the outputs, especially the environment, the environmental stressors, then to choose the breeds, and the final choice on breeds based on the balance of traits that those breeds present to the crossbreeding system, and finally, buying purebred bulls, buy them with EBVs which match, which are superior for your production system and your final market system, and that will put it all together for a successful program.